Beauty is a form of power. People love to say, looks shouldn't matter. Beauty is superficial. Appearance is vanity. If we were all just evolved enough, confident enough, enlightened enough, none of it would matter. But that's not true because looks matter. They affect hiring and dating and leadership roles and credibility, negotiations, influence. They affect how long people listen to you, how quickly they trust you, how seriously they take you, sometimes before you've even said a single word. Beauty is a form of social currency. It always has been. And the people who deny that the loudest are usually the ones that are benefiting from it the most. Because beauty isn't just about attraction. It's about perception, about access. It's about the invisible advantages people pretend don't exist because admitting them is uncomfortable. But discomfort doesn't erase reality. The problem isn't beauty. The problem is dishonesty. Pretending that beauty has no power doesn't make it any less powerful. It just makes people less prepared to navigate a world where appearance absolutely influences opportunity, especially for women. We're told not to care too much, but we're punished when we don't care enough about our looks. We're expected to look effortless while investing an enormous amount of effort. And somehow we're all supposed to pretend that contradiction doesn't exist. So I'm not interested in pretending. I'm interested in honesty because understanding beauty is very different than being controlled by it. And that distinction matters. So welcome to the Line Eraser. I'm Dr. Carol Eisenstat, and today we're talking about beauty as power. How appearances shape opportunity, why women feel guilty for caring, and why owning that truth is not vanity, it's just awareness. Because beauty is not weakness. Beauty is communication. And when you understand how it works, it can absolutely be power. Let's start with the part that people hate admitting. Pretty privilege is real. And people resist that idea because it feels unfair. Because we want to believe the world is merit-based, that talent wins, that intelligence wins, that hard work wins. And ideally, I agree, it should. But human beings are not neutral. We're wired for perception before any proof. We make judgments fast, sometimes within seconds, sometimes before someone even opens their mouth. And as a physician, I see it every day, not just in aesthetics, in my practice, but in how people move through the world. You see it too. Confidence changes how someone enters a room, but perception decides how that room receives them. And appearance plays a role in that, whether people want to admit it or not. Attractive people are often perceived as just more competent, more trustworthy, intelligent, more disciplined, more successful, even when none of that has actually been proven. That's not opinion. That's social psychology. People respond to appearance first and reality second. And that affects real outcomes. Who gets hired, who gets promoted, who gets forgiven for mistakes, who gets approached, who gets listened to, who gets the benefit of the doubt. Even leadership perception changes. People often associate polish with competence, presence with authority, and attractiveness with capability. Again, not because it's always true, but because perception drives behavior. And beauty has always been part of that equation. This isn't some new social media phenomenon. Social media just made it louder. Beauty has always been an influence status. Historically, socially, psychologically, it influences who gets chosen, who gets protected, who gets remembered. The difference now is that we can see it in real time. We watch it happen online every day. Who gets attention, who gets the opportunity, who gets access. And pretending not to notice that doesn't make you evolved. It makes you dishonest because beauty may not be everything, but pretending it means nothing is naive. The smarter conversation is not denying that beauty has influence. It's asking what we do with that truth. And that brings us to something that women know intimately. We're judged either way. If you care too much about how you look, you're vain. If you don't care enough, then you've let yourself go. There is no neutral. There is no in between. Women are expected to be beautiful, but punished for openly pursuing beauty. That contradiction starts early. Be polished, be attractive, be desirable, be effortless, but never let anyone see that effort. Never let them know how much discipline, maintenance, money, time, or even thought goes into it. We love praising natural beauty, but what that usually means is invisible maintenance. Skincare, fitness, hair, sleep, nutrition, Botox, lasers, structure, consistency, none of it's accidental. But society loves the illusion that beauty should just happen, especially for women. There is something that people find truly uncomfortable about a woman openly deciding that she wants to look better. It's as if intention makes it less acceptable, as if beauty is only respectable when it appears effortless. And honestly, that's absurd. Because no one says that about success. No one says she should just have naturally become successful. We respect discipline there, right? We admire effort there. But with beauty, women are expected to perform excellence while pretending that they never tried. That's the trap. And it creates guilt. Women feel guilty for caring, guilty for investing and spending money, guilty for wanting refinement. Especially in aesthetics, people will compliment the results and judge the entire process that took to get there. They love the outcome, but criticize the maintenance. And that's why so many women whisper about treatments they should be allowed to discuss freely and openly. Because the real social rule is this: be beautiful, just don't admit that you're trying. So in my practice at Line Eraser, I see this all the time. Patients almost apologize for wanting to feel better in their own skin, as if wanting confidence requires a justification, but it doesn't. There's nothing shallow about wanting your reflection to feel aligned with how you carry yourself in the world. There is no weakness about refinement. There is nothing embarrassing about maintenance. People love natural beauty. I get it, as long as they've never see or hear about the maintenance. And so that leads us to something that I see all the time also, that confidence changes performance. I think this is where people misunderstand aesthetics the most. They assume it's always about some kind of insecurity, that if someone wants Botox or say filler or a laser done or any kind of treatment really, it must mean that they're unhappy with themselves. But that's definitely not what I see. Most people are not trying to be someone else. They are trying to feel like themselves. They're trying to look the way that they still feel, sharp, capable, present, rested, like themselves. Not a filtered version, not a transformed version, just themselves without the distraction. And that matters more than people realize. Because when people feel better, they show up differently. They walk differently. They speak differently. They lead differently. They date differently. They negotiate differently. They stop hiding. They stop apologizing for taking up space, for taking up room. Confidence changes posture, and posture changes behavior. Behavior changes outcomes. That's not superficial. That's psychology. And as a physician, this is one of the most honest parts of my work. Patients rarely sit down and say, I want to look younger. They say things like, I look exhausted all the time. I feel great, but my face doesn't show that. I don't recognize myself in photos. I still feel like me. I just don't see her anymore. That is not vanity. That's a disconnection. And good aesthetic medicine, when it's done the right way and how it's intended to be used, is not about creating a new face. It's about removing that disconnection. It's about restoring harmony. Sometimes it's softening heaviness. Sometimes it's restoring structure. Sometimes it's improving texture. Sometimes it's just helping someone look less tired so that exhaustion doesn't introduce themselves before they do. That's why I say aesthetics is not about perfection. It's about alignment. Your outside should not feel like it's working against your presence. It should support it. Because sometimes confidence isn't bought. Sometimes it's just unlocked. And this is where the conversation shifts. from beauty to performed beauty. Because there's a very big difference between the two, between refinement and performance, between presence and obvious effort, between looking elevated and looking done. And honestly, this is where aesthetics gets misunderstood the most. People assume more is better, more filler, more volume, more lips, more anti-aging, but true beauty is rarely loud. Luxury is restraint. The most beautiful faces are not the most dramatic. They're just the most balanced. Balanced in proportion, structure, harmony, health, presence. That's what people respond to. Not to trend chasing or overfilled faces, frozen expressions, not trying to perform youth at any and all costs. Because the goal should never be to look 25 forever. The goal should be to look like the best version of yourself right now. Refined, rested, supported, intentional, not inflated. And this is where physician-led aesthetics matters, because good work cannot announce itself. People should notice your presence, not your procedures. They should think in their minds, she looks so good. Not, what did she have done? And that distinction matters. So in my practice, this is one of the strongest philosophies I have. I'm not interested in creating trending faces. I'm not interested in overfilling people into distortion. I'm interested in structure, balance, understanding why the face looks the way that it does before deciding how it needs to be treated. Sometimes the answer is filler. Sometimes it's laser. Sometimes it's stimulating collagen. Sometimes it's the most important part of my job is actually just to say no, because restraint is a form of expertise. Anyone can add. The real skill is knowing when not to. Beauty should never look artificial. It should look inevitable. The goal should never be looking done. The goal should be looking undeniable. And so that brings us to the most important part of this conversation. Beauty should be a tool, not an identity. Because beauty is powerful. But dependence on beauty is dangerous. There's a difference between enhancement and emotional dependence. Between wanting to feel polished and needing appearance to validate your worth. That line matters, because if your self-worth becomes entirely dependent on how you look, you'll never feel secure. There will always be another and the next floor, another comparison, another version of beauty, a younger version of beauty to chase. I'm sorry, but that's not empowerment. That's exhaustion. And I think the healthiest women understand two truths at the same time. Beauty matters, and beauty is not enough. Yes, appearance can open doors. It can shape perception, create confidence, influence opportunity, but it can't replace character. It cannot replace intelligence. It cannot replace boundaries. It cannot replace competence. It can't replace self-respect. Beauty might get you noticed, but substance determines what happens next. And honestly, that applies far beyond aesthetics. Business, it applies in relationships, in leaderships, in motherhood. Presence matters, but presence without substance doesn't hold. The women who I admire the most are never powerful because they're simply beautiful. They're powerful because beauty is only one part of the equation. They have standards, they have discipline, they have discernment. They know how to walk into a room, and they know how to hold it. And that is real power. Not perfection, not performance, not approval. Power is knowing who you are before the room decides for you. And beauty, when it's approached well, should support that, not replace it, not define it, just support it, because beauty opens doors. But substance decides what happens after they're open, and eventually the room always figures out who a person really is. So before we end this episode, I want to leave you with this. There is nothing shallow about wanting to feel powerful in your own skin. There is nothing embarrassing about maintenance. There is nothing weak about refinement. And there is nothing vain about wanting your reflection to match the way that you still feel inside. The problem was never beauty. The problem was shame. The shame around caring, a shame around effort, the shame around admitting that appearance affects reality. I think that women deserve more honesty than that, because once you stop pretending that beauty has no influence, you can stop being controlled by it. You can make choices from awareness, not insecurities, from intention, not pressure. And that's where freedom is, not in denial, in discernment. So, no, beauty shouldn't be your identity, but it can absolutely be part of your power. Used well, it becomes presence, it becomes confidence, it becomes alignment, and that is a very different conversation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having this uncomfortable these uncomfortable conversations with me. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because I have a feeling that a lot more women are thinking this than are saying it out loud. I'm Dr. Carol Eisenstat, and this is The Line Eraser. I'll see you next episode.